The giant space station floated in the black silence between the stars. It was called the Unity Base, a place where many alien races met to talk, trade, and sometimes argue. But for Lieutenant Mason Carter, a human soldier, it was just another posting. He had seen many worlds, but the Unity Base always felt a little more dangerous. So many eyes, so many secrets. Mason walked down the brightly lit hallway, the buzz of 1,000 different languages filling the air. He was tired after a long day, his head still aching from the endless meetings between the human and Vayari delegations. The Vayari were new to the Galactic Council, tall, graceful aliens with silver-blue skin and glowing eyes. They spoke in soft voices, but there was a sharpness behind their smiles. The human side was nervous. Rumors had spread that the Vayari were hard to trust. Mason didn't like rumors. He liked facts. But the truth was, nobody really knew what the Vayari wanted, not even their own diplomats. Mason finally reached his quarters, a small room, just big enough for a bed, a chair, and a screen on the wall. He locked the door behind him, sighing in relief. This was the only place on the station where he could relax, away from all the politics and stress. He took off his jacket, tossed it on the chair, and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his eyes. Tomorrow would be another long day. He just hoped it would be peaceful. Suddenly, the door behind him slid open. Mason jumped to his feet, confused. He was sure he had locked it. He reached for the small plasma pistol on his desk, just in case. A figure stepped into the room. It was a Vayari, a young woman, tall and elegant, dressed in flowing robes that shimmered like water. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. For a moment, she looked just as startled as Mason. "I'm sorry," she said in perfect English, her voice soft but strong. "I did not mean to intrude. I think I am lost." Mason lowered his weapon, trying to hide his surprise. It was unusual for a Vayari, especially someone who looked important, to be wandering around alone. He put the pistol down. "No problem," Mason said, forcing a calm smile. "These halls can get confusing. Do you need help finding your room?" The woman hesitated, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I would rather stay here for a little while, if you don't mind." Mason blinked. He wasn't sure what to say. No one had ever asked to stay in his room before, especially not a Vayari princess, though he didn't know she was a princess yet. He decided to be polite. "All right, you can stay as long as you need. My name is Mason." She relaxed a little. "Thank you, Mason. My name is Erilyn." In that moment, Mason realized his quiet night was about to get much more interesting. Mason tried to hide his surprise as Erilyn, the Vayari guest, stood just inside his room. He noticed she was breathing quickly and kept glancing back at the door. He could tell she was nervous about something. He offered her a seat on the bed, and she sat carefully, hands folded in her lap. Mason pulled the chair closer and sat down, still watching her. There was an awkward silence. Outside, voices passed in the hall, their words muffled by the thick door. After a moment, Mason asked gently, "Are you in trouble? Did someone follow you?" Erilyn shook her head, but Mason could tell she wasn't telling the full truth. She looked down at her hands, searching for the right words. "It is very different here," she finally said. "Your station is much bigger than the Vayari ships. I got lost. And then I heard voices outside my door. They did not sound friendly. I did not want to go back." Mason nodded, understanding. "It's easy to get lost here, and not everyone on this station is friendly." He gave her a reassuring smile. "You're safe here, I promise." Erilyn seemed to relax just a little. She looked at the small room, her eyes curious. "Do all humans live like this? Your space is simple." Mason laughed. "Not always. Soldiers don't get much room. It's enough for me, though." She nodded, trying to understand. There was another silence, but this one felt more comfortable. Mason decided to lighten the mood. "Do you want some water?" he offered, grabbing a cup and filling it from the small dispenser in the wall. Erilyn took the cup carefully. She studied it as if it might be dangerous, then took a small sip. Her eyes widened in surprise. It is cold. On my world, water is always warm. Mason grinned. Cold water is the best after a long day. Erilyn smiled, and the tension faded a little more. She looked at him with curiosity. What is it like, being a human soldier? Mason shrugged. Mostly it's a lot of waiting. Meetings. Sometimes we get to help people or explore new places. I like that part. She seemed interested. On my world, soldiers protect the royal family and our people, but they rarely speak to outsiders. Why did you come here? Mason asked. Most Veyari don't travel far from their home planet. Erilyn hesitated. My father sent me to learn about humans, to see if we can trust you. She glanced at him, searching his face. I hope I do not disappoint him. Mason smiled. You're doing fine. You're braver than most humans I know. A gentle laugh escaped Erilyn's lips. For the first time, she seemed at ease. Suddenly, there was a strange sound outside. A quiet click, like someone trying to open a locked door. Mason stood quickly, signaling Erilyn to stay silent. He listened, heart pounding. The night was getting even more interesting, and maybe more dangerous. Mason's heart beat faster as he listened to the quiet click outside his door. He held his breath, motioning for Erilyn to stay quiet. They both waited. After a few seconds, the noise stopped, and the hallway became silent again. Mason waited a little longer before finally relaxing. It's okay, he whispered. Whoever it was is gone now. Erilyn looked scared. Mason wanted to make her feel safe, so he spoke softly. You can stay here as long as you need, Erilyn. I'll keep watch. Erilyn nodded, her eyes grateful. She stood up and walked slowly around the room, studying everything. She paused by a small photo on Mason's desk, a picture of a blue planet. Is this your home? She asked, pointing at it. Yes, Mason said with a gentle smile. That's Earth. Have you ever seen it from space? Erilyn shook her head. No, but I have heard it is beautiful. On my world, the sky is silver and the plants glow at night. Mason imagined a silver sky and glowing plants. It sounded magical and strange. Your world sounds amazing, he said. For a moment, both forgot their worries. They shared stories about their homes. Mason told Erilyn about his childhood, how he used to camp in the mountains and swim in cold rivers. Erilyn described the great crystal forests of her planet, where light danced in the trees. Time passed quickly. They laughed at each other's stories, surprised by how much they had in common. Mason learned that Erilyn loved music. In return, Mason played a quiet song on his small tablet, letting Erilyn listen to a human melody for the first time. Erilyn's eyes grew wide with wonder. It is beautiful, she said softly. We do not have music like this. Mason was happy to share something from his world. He watched Erilyn, realizing she was not just a visitor. She was brave and curious, maybe even lonely. When the song ended, Erilyn sat on the bed and looked up at Mason. I know it is strange, but may I stay here tonight? I do not feel safe alone. Mason nodded. Of course. I can sleep in the chair. You take the bed. Erilyn hesitated, then smiled. Thank you, Mason. You are kinder than I expected a human soldier to be. Mason set up his chair near the door, just in case anyone tried to enter. He kept his small plasma pistol close, but he was not afraid. Somehow, protecting Erilyn felt important. The room grew quiet. The lights dimmed. Erilyn lay on the bed, her eyes closing slowly, but Mason knew she felt safer now. As Mason watched over her, he realized this night was not just strange. It was special. Two people from different worlds had found trust, and maybe even friendship in the most unexpected place. He wondered what tomorrow would bring, and if the strange visitor outside the door would return. The station's artificial night settled in, making the room even quieter. Mason sat in his chair by the door, still alert. Erilyn lay on the bed, her eyes closed, but Mason could tell she was not really asleep. Shadows moved softly across the walls, cast by the blinking lights of distant ships outside the window. After a while, Erilyn opened her eyes and looked at Mason. Her voice was a whisper, as if she was afraid someone might hear her. "Mason, can I ask you something?" He nodded, keeping his tone gentle. "Of course, Erilyn. Anything." She sat up and drew her knees to her chest, hugging them like a child. "Do you trust everyone on this base?" Mason thought about her question. He wanted to say yes, but he knew it was not true. "No," he said quietly. "Some people have their own secrets." Erilyn bit her lip. She hesitated, then decided to speak. "I heard something tonight, before I found your room. 2 people were speaking in the hallway. They talked about stopping the peace talks. They said humans and Vayari should never be friends." Her voice shook a little. "They sounded angry. I think they want to cause trouble." Mason's face grew serious. Now he understood why Erilyn had been afraid. "Did you see them?" Erilyn shook her head. "No. I hid behind a corner. I only heard their voices. One sounded human, the other, maybe Vayari, but I am not sure." Mason leaned forward, his mind racing. "You did the right thing coming here," he said. "If someone is planning to ruin the peace talks, we need to find out who." Erilyn looked down, worry on her face. "I do not want my people to be blamed if something bad happens. That is why I am scared." Mason gave her a reassuring smile. "We'll figure this out, together." He stood up and paced the small room, thinking hard. "You said they were near your room." Erilyn nodded. "Yes, just a few doors down." Mason checked the lock on his door again. He wanted to make sure Erilyn was safe for the night. He felt responsible for her now. As he sat back down, Erilyn spoke again. "Mason, is it true that humans never give up?" Mason smiled. "Most of the time, yes. We're stubborn. We fight for what we believe in. That's why we're still here, I guess." Erilyn seemed comforted by his words. She looked at him with respect and hope. "Then I will trust you." They agreed to watch out for each other. Mason promised to help keep her safe and to find out who wanted to ruin the peace. Erilyn promised to tell Mason everything she heard or saw, no matter how small. As the night went on, they talked quietly, planning what they would do next. Mason realized this was no longer just a simple assignment. Now it was a mission to protect not just Erilyn, but the hope of peace between their 2 worlds. The next morning, the Unity base was already buzzing with activity. Mason and Erilyn met quietly in the hallway, careful to avoid the crowds. The air felt heavier, filled with suspicion and worry. Both knew something was wrong. "We need to check the halls near your room," Mason said softly. "If someone is trying to sabotage the talks, they might have left clues." Erilyn nodded, her glowing eyes scanning the corridor. "I agree. We must be careful. The saboteur could still be here." They moved slowly, watching for anything unusual. The corridor was long and narrow, with doors on either side. The walls hummed with the station's energy, and distant footsteps echoed down the hall. When they reached the section near Erilyn's quarters, Mason stopped. "Look at this," he whispered, pointing to a small scratch on the doorframe. Erilyn bent down to examine it. "This is not from normal use. Someone tried to force the door open." Mason checked the lock. It had been tampered with, but not fully broken. They wanted to get in, but someone stopped them. Suddenly, a soft metallic noise came from the far end of the hall. Mason motioned for Erilyn to stay behind him and moved toward the sound, pistol drawn. The noise stopped. He turned slowly. "Who's there?" No answer. Only shadows danced on the walls. Mason's heart raced. Was this the saboteur? Was he about to find the enemy? Erilyn stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mason, wait. Listen." They both fell silent. From behind a vent grate came a faint whisper, a voice arguing quietly with someone else. Mason crept closer. What are they saying? Erilyn's eyes narrowed. They speak of stopping the peace talks and of blaming the humans. Mason's blood ran cold. This is worse than I thought. Suddenly, footsteps approached from the main corridor. Mason and Erilyn quickly slipped into a nearby room, closing the door softly behind them. From their hiding place, they watched as two figures walked past the hallway, one human, one Veyari. They whispered sharply, glancing around nervously. Mason whispered, "We need proof, but we can't confront them now." Erilyn nodded. "If we act too soon, we might lose our chance." The two watched as the figures disappeared down another corridor. When the coast was clear, Mason pulled out a small device from his pocket, a scanner that could detect recent electronic tampering. He moved it along the walls and doors, watching the screen carefully. The device beeped near the doorframe where the scratch was. "That confirms it," Mason said. "Someone is working against peace, and they are hiding in plain sight." Erilyn looked at him with determination. "We must be ready. For now, we watch and wait." Mason felt a new sense of purpose. Protecting Erilyn and the peace was no longer just duty, it was personal. They left the room quietly, disappearing into the crowd of busy diplomats and soldiers. The enemy was close, but Mason and Erilyn were closer and ready. The tension in the Unity base was rising. Mason and Erilyn knew they had to work together if they wanted to stop the sabotage. They met in Mason's quarters to plan their next move. "I don't trust many people here," Mason said. "But I do trust you, Erilyn. We need to be ready for anything." Erilyn nodded. "I want to learn how to defend myself, just in case." Mason smiled. "Good. I'll teach you some basic human defense moves." He showed her how to stand firmly, how to block a strike, and how to use quick moves to escape danger. Erilyn was a fast learner. She practiced quietly, her graceful movements a mix of strength and speed. In return, Erilyn shared something unexpected. She reached out and touched Mason's forehead lightly. A strange warmth spread through his mind. He felt calm and clear, as if his thoughts were sharper. "This is a Veyari ability," Erilyn explained. "We can share feelings and thoughts. It helps us understand each other better." Mason nodded, fascinated. "That will help us work as a team." They practiced together for hours, blending human strength and Veyari mental skills. Mason realized how powerful they could be if they trusted each other fully. Later, they tested their new teamwork during a quiet patrol of the base. Mason kept watch while Erilyn used her mental ability to sense unusual emotions nearby. Suddenly, Erilyn froze. "There is someone hiding in the storage corridor," she whispered. "They feel nervous, afraid of being caught." Mason drew his pistol, and they moved carefully toward the corridor. Shadows flickered in the dim light. They found a man trying to break into a secure locker. He looked up, startled, but did not try to run. Mason stepped forward. "You're caught. Who sent you?" The man hesitated, then said, "I'm just a hired hand. I don't know names." Erilyn's eyes narrowed. "Why are you trying to break in?" The man glanced nervously between them. "I was told to find something that could ruin the talks. I don't want trouble." Mason and Erilyn exchanged a look. This was bigger than they thought. "We need to report this," Mason said. "But we have to be careful who we tell." Erilyn agreed. "Yes, the enemy is inside. We cannot trust everyone." Back in Mason's quarters, they locked the door and talked late into the night. They planned to watch the base closely, protect the peace talks, and keep each other safe. Their bond grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and the shared goal of peace. Mason looked at Erilyn and thought, "This is more than an alliance. It's a friendship that could change everything." Days passed quickly on the Unity base. The peace talks continued, but Mason and Erilyn stayed alert. They knew the enemy was still among them, trying to stop the fragile hope between humans and Vayari. One evening, Mason and Erilyn met on the observation deck. The large window showed the vast stars outside, sparkling like diamonds in the dark sky. The silence was peaceful, a rare moment of calm in the busy station. Erilyn leaned on the railing and looked at Earth in the distance. "Your world is beautiful," she said softly. "I wish I could see it up close someday." Mason smiled. "You're welcome to visit. There's a lot of forests and mountains you would like." They stood quietly, sharing the moment. Then Erilyn spoke, her voice serious. "Thank you for trusting me, Mason. It is not easy for a Vayari to trust humans." Mason looked at her with respect. "And it's not easy for humans to trust aliens. But we're learning." Suddenly, alarms rang through the base. Red lights flashed, and a loud voice ordered everyone to stay calm but prepare for an emergency. "What's happening?" Erilyn asked, her eyes wide. Mason grabbed her arm. "We need to find out. This could be the saboteurs' next move." They rushed through the corridors, heading toward the command center. The base was in chaos, soldiers and diplomats running, security teams moving fast. At the command center, Mason and Erilyn learned that a power failure had struck a key part of the station. Some important data about the peace talks was at risk. "Someone is trying to sabotage the talks," Mason said grimly. Erilyn nodded. "We must act quickly." They joined a small team sent to the damaged area. As they walked, Erilyn used her mental ability to sense danger. Her eyes glowed faintly, scanning the surroundings. Suddenly, Mason spotted a shadow moving in the corner. "There!" he shouted, drawing his pistol. The figure froze. Mason and Erilyn moved closer, their steps quiet but fast. The person turned out to be one of the station's technicians, someone trusted by both humans and Vayari. His face showed fear and guilt. "Why are you doing this?" Mason asked firmly. The technician looked down. "I was told to stop the talks. I thought it was for the good of my people." Erilyn shook her head. "Peace is better than fear." Mason cuffed the man. "You're coming with us." Back on the observation deck, Mason and Erilyn looked up at the stars again. The crisis was over. For now. Erilyn smiled. "No matter where we come from, under these stars, we are all the same." Mason nodded, "And we fight together for a better future." In that quiet moment, both knew the night they shared in Mason's room was just the beginning of a friendship that would change the galaxy. The arrest of the technician sent ripples through the Unity base. Rumors swirled, and the peace talks paused while the leaders tried to understand what was really happening. Mason and Erilyn knew their work was far from over. In a quiet meeting room, Mason sat beside Erilyn as diplomats from many worlds gathered. Tension filled the air like a storm ready to break. The humans and Vayari faced each other, their faces tight with worry. Erilyn stood to speak. "We must not let fear divide us. The sabotage was meant to stop peace, but it has shown us why peace is so important." Her words carried weight. The room grew silent. Even the toughest diplomats looked thoughtful. Mason added, "We have proof the sabotage came from outside the human and Vayari groups. Someone wants to keep us apart." A human diplomat nodded. "It's time to find out who." Together, the diplomats agreed to share all their information and watch each other closely. Trust would be hard to rebuild, but Mason and Erilyn believed it was possible. Over the next days, Mason and Erilyn worked side by side, helping the investigation. They moved through the base, asking questions and gathering clues. Sometimes they faced suspicion, but their teamwork was clear. One afternoon, Erilyn pulled Mason aside. "I found something strange in the security logs. Someone erased important files just before the sabotage." Mason frowned. "That's serious. Can we find out who did it?" Erilyn nodded. "I am trying." They spent long hours piecing together the puzzle. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The trail led to a small group of mercenaries hiding on the station. These mercenaries had no loyalty to any race. They worked only for money and power. Mason clenched his fists. They want to start a war so they can sell weapons. Erlen's eyes burned with anger. We cannot let that happen. The leaders agreed to act fast. Security forces captured the mercenaries and recovered the stolen files. The peace talks restarted with new hope. Mason and Erlen watched as the diplomats shook hands and smiled for the first time in days. It was a small victory, but an important one. Later, Erlen turned to Mason. You taught me much about trust and courage. Mason smiled. And you taught me about patience and seeing beyond fear. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but their bond gave them strength. As the stars shone bright outside the window, the station no longer felt like a place of danger. It was a place where two worlds could come together. Mason thought about the night Erlen first entered his room. Who would have guessed that accident would lead to so much? Erlen smiled softly. Together, we will build a better future. The peace talks were now moving forward, slowly but steadily. Mason and Erlen had become well known across the Unity base, not just as diplomats or soldiers, but as symbols of hope. News of the night the alien princess had stayed in the human soldiers' room spread quietly. Many found it strange at first, but soon it became a story told with respect and admiration. It showed that even in the most unlikely places, friendship and trust could grow. One afternoon, Mason and Erlen were invited to a special gathering. Leaders from many planets came to hear their story and the lessons they had learned. Erlen spoke first. Our worlds are different, but we share the same hopes, fears, and dreams. The night I stayed in Mason's room was not just a chance event. It was the start of something new. Mason smiled and added, when we choose to trust and work together, we become stronger than any threat. The crowd applauded. For many, this moment marked a new beginning. After the gathering, Mason and Erlen walked through the busy halls. They talked about the future, about peace, exploration, and maybe even a time when humans and Vayari would travel to each other's worlds as friends. Erlen looked thoughtful. I never imagined I would feel so close to someone from another world. You have taught me much about humanity. Mason laughed softly. And you've taught me to see beyond what I thought I knew. Their friendship had grown deep, built on shared challenges and hard-fought trust. One evening, they stood on the observation deck again, looking at the stars. The same stars shone above both Earth and Erlen's home planet, a reminder that no matter the distance, they shared the same sky. Mason said, no matter where we come from, the stars remind us we're part of something bigger. Erlen nodded, and together, we can face anything. As they stood side by side, the future looked brighter than ever. Their bond was more than just a friendship. It was a promise that peace and understanding could cross any border. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had shown it was ready. The day of the peace treaty signing finally arrived. The great hall of the Unity base was filled with leaders from many planets. Cameras floated in the air, capturing every moment for the galaxy to see. Mason stood beside Erlen, both dressed in formal uniforms. The tension in the room was thick, but the air also held hope, a fragile hope that had grown stronger over weeks of struggle. The Vayari princess looked calm but focused. Mason felt proud. He knew how far they had come, from a chance meeting in a small room to this moment that could change history. When the treaty was read aloud, voices quieted. The words promised peace, friendship, and cooperation between humans and Vayari, two worlds that had once been strangers. As the final signatures were made, applause filled the hall. Leaders shook hands, smiled, and even laughed. It was a victory for everyone. Later, Mason and Erlen stepped outside the hall, away from the crowd. The station's observation deck awaited them, a quiet place to reflect. Erlen looked at Mason with a soft smile. This treaty is more than paper. It is the beginning of a new future. Mason nodded. A future where we face the stars together. They stood side by side, watching the stars shine brightly through the large window. The galaxy seemed full of promise. Erilyn's voice was quiet but full of hope. "Thank you, Mason, for your kindness, your courage, and your friendship." Mason smiled. "Thank you for trusting me, for showing me that we're stronger together." They both knew this was just the start. Many challenges lay ahead, but for the first time, humanity and the Vayari would face them united. As the station hummed softly around them, Mason thought back to the night Erilyn had entered his room by mistake. That unexpected moment had set everything in motion. Now their story was part of something much bigger, an example of what could happen when two very different people choose to understand each other. The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter that night. A new dawn had come.